In Part 28 we booted a computer into the pre-execution environment running Windows PE, which allowed us to install images over the network. Now we're going to do the very same thing with Hyper-V, and that will enable you to install images over the network and create images of your, let's say, reference systems, which you can later capture and use as installation media. Hyper-V, of course, is a very good tool to do this, because you can have multiple, ones for Pro, ones for Core, for different parts of your organization, all on the same machine. So we'll install Hyper-V, and we do that using the control panel. Turn Windows features on and off. Obviously going to turn it on, and we're going to install Hyper-V. Now before you do that, you have to check the BIOS is actually supporting Hyper-V, and there may be an adjustment you have to make to the BIOS to do that. All reasonably modern machines would have that facility. So install Hyper-V, and then the next thing we need to do is to install Server 2019 from here. This URL will be in the comments, so you don't have to make a note of it. I'm going to download a VHD, virtual hard disk, and that means we can just connect it straight onto the Hyper-V virtual machine, and you'll have Server 2019. So download that, start up Hyper-V, and you can see I've done it already here. Basically, sorry, wrong thing, missed. Basically connect the hard drive to wherever you put this downloaded VHD. I put it in Documents, Hyper-V, so it's not sort of, it doesn't need administrator to move it about. Start it up, and I'll just do that. Okay, and here's Server 2019 running. Now, we need this because we're going to extract parts of Windows deployment server to our Linux box to allow the Linux box to provide all the files that a PXE boot will need. And the reason for that is that the first boot, the EFI file that loads everything else, the only one that works is the Microsoft one in Hyper-V. The things like grub and PXE Linux and things like that start, depending on whether you're using legacy or UEFI, you can experiment with them yourself, but you'll find that none of them actually allow you to boot as you'd expect. They all come to a grinding halt at some point, but the Microsoft one obviously does work. So files that we need, are Windows now that's the EFI file that we need for UEFI. So we're going to copy that and put it on our Linux server, which is actually connected there. Copy them over. Now all the files that you need, and you don't need very many, are in the comments, and you'll see that very few of them are actually required. The ones that aren't required are things like certificates, policies, other things like that, that if they don't exist, this boot manager just skips over them. So we don't bother with them and minimize the number of files that we need. So they need to be put into a position where tftp and DHCP can get them and use them. And I'll show you the layout on the Linux box later. So once we've got the files, we can shut this down and start creating virtual machines for reference images, golden images, things like that. Now there's one I've created already. But the first thing to do is create a virtual switch. So we need to create one called external, which, believe it or not, is connected to the external network. That means it can get to the Linux server. So create that and save it. Okay. And now we're going to create a new virtual machine. Won't be able to do anything with it till we've set up the server, but let's just do that now. So create a new one, new virtual machine. Okay, that's good. Name, well, that's anything you like, so I'm going to call it demo 1. You can store the virtual machine anywhere. This is going to put it in programs data, that's fine. It's the virtual hard disk that we want. Now we want to use UEFI, which is generation 2, UEFI. Startup memory 2048. I mean, problem is we're not going to be able to use dynamic memory for this virtual machine because the setup often comes up with a fault saying can't find the Windows software license terms. That's not actually the problem, it's to do with the virtual memory, so turn that off. Connection, we're going to use the virtual network external that we created earlier. This is the virtual disk. Now it is important now to move it to somewhere where you can get to it. So go to Documents, Hyper-V, VMs or something, select that. Size 127, that's fine. Install the operating system later. Now the thing we've got to turn off is checkpoints. Now this is the boot order. It's actually going to boot from the network adapter first. It's not going to find anything on the hard disk, so that doesn't matter. But checkpoints, we need to turn off checkpoints. The reason is we want to keep a VHD file integral. If you have checkpoints, you have to merge them together before you can do anything with the VHD file itself. So it's important to turn them off. And that's our virtual machine ready. We now need to get the Linux server ready to give it to the correct files.